Hello and welcome to part two of this video series, um, where I'm talking about Android Studio tutorial stuff for college. Um, in this video, we're going to be addressing the skills needed for our second assignment. I'm not going to be doing the assignment itself. I'm going to be doing a similar thing to the assignment. Um, I will show you where that is. That will be here. Oh, seems we lost the track of that. But I say, okay, so basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building um a thing to keep track of like a weekly dog feeding report, where we're gonna give enter grams of food for each day of the week and generate report on total grams for the week. Okay, so that's what our goal is. This will mean we're going to be using a second screen. So we're going to have a screen to insert the values, and then we're going to have our report screen for seeing the report for the total grams. Um, we're also going to be using loops. So yeah. So first thing you need to do is obviously you need to first watch the first video, which will address what is called part one. So part one is about GitHub setup. So obviously we don't need to create an account because we did that in the previous video. Um, but we still need to create a repo and we need to clone that to our local. So we need to repeat some of these steps, but we don't need to create an account because we've done that already. Then we can repeat all these steps, GitHub setup, creating an Android Studio project, um, naming it, fixing the compile SDK version to be 35, not 34, committing the base files. So that all of these steps I've done already for this project, for my new project. So we had to repeat a lot of steps in part one. What we don't have to repeat in part one also is the coding part because we're going to be coding slightly differently. So you're welcome to have a look at this coding section, but we're not going to be following this exactly. So then we're going to go on to part two now. So I've already done all the things needed in part one. Well, actually, no, I haven't. But I have created the repo. I have cloned it to local. I've created a project in that repo. Now I just need to commit the base files so I can say started project. Okay, cool. So now this is what our project looks like. So let's have a look at what it looks like. I think I need to run a sync. This button, if it's gray, as we see in part one, you need to run a sync and then it will become available. Um, so yeah, let's just wait for that. Then we're going to be looking at this file here, which connects to this file here. Oh, sorry, actually, before we do that, part two, fix new glitch. There's a new glitch that we have, um, which is basically the fix. We have to go to this file here, which is this one, and we have to change this 16 to 15. This is another glitch that's happened, and then we actually need to run this again. Same project with variable files. Um, so that'll fix that. And then we can now look at coding, which is going to create a second screen. So the second screen we can see in the module manual in Unit 4. So here's the module manual. So unit 4 is here. Unit 4 covers loops, but they also talk about creating a second screen. So if you want to know how get material and how to do that, you can see in here. But I'm going to be doing that. Um, but I'm going to be following this. So let's have a look. So you just go File, New Activity. They recommend empty activity, but I'm going to be using an empty views activity. So let's see once this is done. Okay, this is now available. I'm just going to test that it works without any errors, which means that this is going to have fixed the error that would have come up if we didn't. Okay, can wait for that. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and make our second screen. Or should we wait for this first? Oh, yeah, let's wait for it. Cool. So it doesn't seem to have any errors, so that's great. Okay, so let's make our second screen. So yeah, so go File, New, Activity, Empty Views Activity. So now we're going to create our second screen. We're going to call it Report. Um, so that should be fine. Everything default here is fine. So let's go ahead and click Finish. This must be Kotlin, which it is by default, so that's all good. Generate a layout file should be checked, so that's all good. Finish. It's going to ask you this. You can say that's fine. Then we'll see that our files have been changed here. Okay, there's this change we just made. And then there's these other changes. So we could commit that in two parts, but we could commit it together. It doesn't matter. So for this, we can just say glitch fix. And then checking the others, we can say created new screen. Um, and now let's look at again what we're trying to do. So it's a weekly dog feeding report, enter grams of food for each day of the week. Okay, so how I'm going to do this is I basically got the code already in this project here. This is version 1. We've also got version 2. Version 2 is the one we're working on here. So let's go ahead and look at version 1 because that's going to inform us on how to approach it. Okay, so we want to create a screen like this. How much did you feed your dog this week? Enter grams of food for Monday. Um, and then there's a text error. This, you can't actually see it, but that's for errors. And then there's the next button. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 components. Let's start with our heading and this is going to be a dynamic subheading. Okay. Let's also look at what we're calling them. This is just text view. This is day text view. Okay, these names are going to get a bit complex. So um, I'm going to keep them as they are, and hopefully it doesn't get too overwhelming the detail of the ID. But obviously, as you know, IDs have to be a certain thing in order for the logic to work. So this is the logic I have for it. But for it to work, it needs to be correctly connected. Anyway, okay, so let's create our heading. How much did you feed your dog this week? Okay, so we go to activity report. How much did you, well, let's actually keep it sentence case. How much did you feed your dog this week? That is the entire purpose of the app, is to ask that question. Okay, you can edit the style and stuff if you want. That's up to you. So how much did you feed your dog this week? Then just select it. Make sure you selected these to make those positioning proper. Now we're going to add a second one. So the ID of the first one actually doesn't matter. This one, the ID does matter, and I'm just going to match it with the other ID. Um, the default content actually doesn't matter. Well, actually, no, I think it does need to start as this. But yeah, now it's getting very technical, so you don't need to pay as much attention here. You can even skip forward if you want. Um, but basically you're going to need to create these things, um, and you're going to need to make sure that these IDs match up with the logic. Um, so let me try and actually do that as quickly as possible. So now we need a plain text with this ID. So this ID, edit text grams. Okay, we've got now this one here as well, which is air text view. Sorry, it's not one of those, it's one of these. It's a text view. And then we're going to have a button, which is called next button. Okay, so now we've done all that technical stuff. So here's if you did skip forward, this is where you want to have skip forward to. So welcome back. Okay, so how much did your dog eat this week? Enter the grams of food for Monday. So we're going to start with Monday. That's when you enter this value here. Actually, there's a problem with this value, which is this is actually meant to be a number. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go to text or common text, and then I'm going to select number. Drag that in, put that in there. So that needs to be a number. Enter grams of food for Monday. Then underneath, this is where an error would show. So by default, there'll be nothing showing. Um, okay, I guess that's fine. Sorry, it's a bit technical. And then obviously our next button. Okay, so let's have a little pause here. This is our first page. So title, the first question, the first answer. Um, Once we answer the first question, we're going to hit next. It might give an error, in which case we need to fix something, or it's going to take us to the next step. It's going to say enter grams food for Tuesday. So we're going to enter them one by one, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then after that, we're going to hit next, and it's going to take us to the second screen. So that's the behavior we want. Okay. And that's the behavior that, oh, okay, I made actually a big problem here. So I put all this code in here in activity report, but it's actually meant to be an activity main. Okay, so let's fix that. I'm just going to go to this view here, code view. I hope this works. Copy. So I select all, Control A, Control C, Control A, Control V. Let's see now. Okay, this needs to change. So I'm just going to change this tools context to that. Otherwise, everything is fine. Then I'm going to go back here into this view, and I'm just going to delete everything because we don't need an activity report. We need a main activity. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we can see it's all in here. Another thing we might want to do, just make sure everything's positioned. Okay, that's not positioned, so just do that. Okay, great. So now that's done, let's go here. We can discard those changes because that's activity report. We don't need any changes there. Here's our activity main. So now we can say activity main. Or actually we can leave that for now. We don't have to commit it yet. Let's first add some logic. Okay, so for the logic, let's go to this activity domain. I'm just going to Control C, Control A, Control C, go here, Control A, Control V, and then I'm going to show you what I put in here. Okay, this is the first problem for me is I need to make sure that stays like that. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got this array. So let's go have a look at the code. So I've inserted these things, meaning I've inserted this array here. This is just saying the days. This is an array saying the days. So we've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that's an array we need. We define it like that. Um, and then our next array is going to be our answers. So this is going to help generate our questions. It's going to be what food, how many grams did you feed for Monday? How many grams did you feed for Tuesday? So this is our almost like our questions array. This is almost like our answers array, which is going to input grams. So defined it in this way, just kept it as 0 for default for each one of the 7. Then we're going to have a current index that's going to help us along the way. Um, I'll let you know how we're going to use that in a minute. Okay, next up we have we're kind of getting we're creating handlers for each of our elements. So for the day text view, that's the question. We've got it here as call it day text view, so we can populate the question using that. So enter grams of food for specific day. Now current index becomes important because um, every time you hit next, this gets updated. And because that gets updated and starts at 0, when you hit next, it adds 1. Um, so then the question changes. So okay, let's go have a look at that. Um, This is actually quite interesting. I never thought about this. So there's something going on here which I'd never thought about, which is this whole thing seems to be rerunning because for this to get a different number, this needs to be ran again. But this only runs on create. So it makes me wonder, how does this get updated? How does this get ran again when we do the next button? It's almost like when we click next. Oh no, it's not happening here. Okay, so then this we can actually hard code to 0. We don't need to say current index. Only when we click next does it actually need to be dynamic. Okay, sorry, not confused anymore. Okay, so for the first one, we're going to show, but actually we've got a default for this already. So we can actually comment that out. We don't need this. Unless we came here and we said, question will show here. So we're saying question will show here, but when the user sees it, it will load and instantly the message will change to this. So they might not even see the thing that says it'll load. Okay, so there you go. Okay, cool. So this grabs all the elements, this sets the question, then this creates a listener on the next button. So whenever you click it, this whatever's in here happens. So what happens in here? First of all, it'll take whatever you inputted. There's another way to write this, which is like that. So it'll take this, the edit gram text element, it will get the text from it, convert it to a string, then convert that to int or null, basically turning it into a number. But if it's not a number, it'll turn it into null. Then we're checking if that is null. If it is null, we're going to say, please enter a number. So what this is actually doing is this is going to populate our error element, which is here. So if we enter something that's not a number, it's going to say, please enter a number. So that's our validation. If it is a number, as in it's not null, then it's going to do this. First of all, it's going to set the error text to blank because there's a possibility they have already set an error. So just for safety, we're going to set that to blank immediately. Then our grams, we're going to take that value and we're going to set it to the grams for the current index. So the current index could be 0 in the first instance. But then if they ever click it again, it's going to be something else. It's going to be incremented up 1. So it starts at 0. When they click the next button, sets the gram value for the first one. So for this position. Then once they click next, that current index is going to be +1. So it's going to be 1. And then next one is going to be +1 again, which means 2. Okay, so that's how that works. This plus plus means it's incrementing up 1. This is the same as saying that +1. Okay. Which is also the same as that. Which is also the same as that. Okay, so now if the current index is less than 7, it means it's not the last step. Otherwise, it means it's the last step, which means that the next button at that point needs to take us to the next page. But if it's not the last step, it just does this. It sets the message again for the question, dynamically setting the day, and the input edit text, it's setting it back to null, because that is for the user to now stipulate. Because they've entered, say, for instance, they gave it 1 gram of food for Monday. When they click next, we want to make that value blank again. We don't want to say, okay, you gave it 1 for Monday, so what did you give it 1 for Tuesday as well? We want to allow them to start from scratch for each day. So that's why we're setting that to null. Okay, on the last step, all days done, go to report screen. So this means it's the last step, and we're going to then take them to the report screen. So we're going to use this intent stuff. So this intent stuff, we can also see it in the module manual here in section 4 as well, or unit 4. This is part of it. Yeah. So they're showing you how to do it here on page 64 and this page as well. So anyway, I've done that. This is how you pass it for the data, which you can also see them doing here. Put extra table number. Then start activity. Okay, cool. So let's test that out. Gonna run it and we're gonna make sure it works. Okay, so you can see the question automatically populated. We didn't even see it say question will show here. So yeah, there's your title. How much will your dog, how much did you feed your dog this week? Enter grams of food for Monday. 1. Next. Enter grams for Tuesday. Let's see what happens if I just hit next without doing anything. Please enter a number. 1 again. Wednesday. I'm just going to say 1 for each one. I'm going to say 2 for Sunday. Okay, cool. And it's taken us to a new screen. So that's all working perfectly. So that's because that's working perfectly, I'm going to now commit this. I'm going to say first screen. I'm going to push that. Okay. Now let's go to our second screen. What does our second screen need? Let's have a look what it needs. Just needs a title, dog feeding report, and it needs um, another text view underneath it that it's going to be dynamically generated with an important ID called the report text view. So let's insert then 2 text views. The second one of which the ID is important. It's going to be report text view. First one, obviously, we need the text, dog feeding report. Obviously, we want to position our elements. The second one, we actually do want to make it a bit bigger. And I think, want to center line it. I think so. Um, I don't think it actually needs to be that big. It's just like that. Let's make it a little bit bigger. We can actually just leave it with the thing text view in there. That's going to automatically change. So the user won't see that. Okay. So now that's done. We can see the changes we've made here. Now let's add our logic. So that's this one. Just going to Control A, Control C. go here, Control A, Control V. This top thing probably needs to change. Let's have a look. Yeah, that needs to just be as it was. No, not that. Okay. Um, so we can see what's been done here. Starts here. Okay, so let's have a look. Report text view. So this is going to be the element that we want to populate automatically. That's this one. That's just going to give us our total number of grams, or our sentence, which gives total number of grams. Um, this is how you get the data that was passed from the other screen. It gets the days and the grams arrays. Then we're going to calculate the total. So we're going to declare that variable and assign it to as 0 to start. Then we're going to first ensure that these two arrays are um, not null. Actually, we don't need the days array. Don't know why that's in there. That should work. We don't even need to hand it over. Okay. So now we're just making sure that the grams array is not null. Then we're going to loop through it using this loop syntax. And we're going to add each day's grams to the total. Then we're going to assign this thing the sentence, which includes the total grams, and we're going to put it into a sentence that says um, total colon, and then that's where we put the number, and then we say grams fed this week. Otherwise, we're just going to say error if this is for some reason null. Okay, so let's run that. Launch it again. Let's add for each day. Add 2 for Sunday. Then it says we've given total dog feeding report total 8 grams fed this week. So it means that it's given us a report on how many grams we fed for the week, which is then great. So basically that's that. So what I'm going to do now is we can see for this, we removed this because we realized we didn't need to hand that over. And this is for our other one. So then we can say second screen. Okay, lastly, we're going to create some tests. Actually, not lastly. Okay, so we've now dealt with arrays and second screens and loops. So now we're going to write tests, instrumented activity tests using. Okay, so these are the steps. Right-click the function you want to test. Right-click the function you want to test. Okay, so we want to run tests for both of these on create functions. So let's go here. Then we're going to go to tests. And then when it asks us, oh, sorry, we're in the wrong place. This one. Okay, so start with main activity on create. Right-click the function, go to test. It says, do you want to create a test? Yes, please. That's JUnit 5 is fine. We're going to include a setup. We're going to click OK. We're going to double click that. We're going to double click that. We're going to click OK. It's an Android test. Okay. So this is our demo test. So let's go ahead and let's look at what that would give us. Oops. Go and click add. Okay, so now we've got this test. Let's create our other test as well for now. Go to report, go to the function, go to test, create new test, click that, okay, Android test, add. Okay, so now we can say added both tests. Commit that. So now let's go to our first test. Main activity test is the automatic name. Control, okay, so I've come here and I've copied this. So Control C after highlighting that. Then I'm going to Control A, Control V. Just going to check in here. This needs to stay as the original. Okay, so this is the default test that we're given as an example. So let's first give this example test. So just for further reference, this test that we're given here, we can find it in Arc under Learning Unit 2 Theme 5 under the lecture resources. There's a thing called Create Unit Tests over here. And that's where we can find this test here, this default test. So let's just use that. Now now I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to my other main activity test that I originally made. Go back here and then paste that in. Keep that the same. And then let's see what our test does. Okay, so our test differs quite a bit. We're not using activity scenario, we're just using scenario. Oh no, sorry, this is the variable. So that actually doesn't matter. The variable, we used a different variable. We can even use the same variable. Let's use the same variable. We can even not have spacing. Activity scenario means we have to change it there as well and there as well, I think. Cool. That's fine. Test button, click, updates text view, test input, and okay, so the name that we give this doesn't matter. We can even just call it test one. If we want. Then we can run that test by doing that. But before we run it, let's look at what is in the test. Okay, so here's the important thing. What is in the test? Also, let's keep that at the top. Okay, so first of all, we're saying the edit text grams, let's get a handle on that. The next button, let's get a handle on that. The day text view, let's get a handle on that. Then we're going to say set the the edit text grams to 100 and then perform a click on the next button. Then we're going to assert that the title is now containing Tuesday because it's meant to have started on Monday, and then when you hit the next button, it's meant to say Tuesday. So that's what our test is doing. So we can test that and we can see if it's working. Unresolved for some reason. Um, Let me just pause the recording and I'll try and figure this out. And I'll get back to you. Okay, I see it's actually because of this test here, report test. This is where it's referencing Jupyter. I'm not sure why that issue occurred. Org.j units. Hmm. So maybe then what it's best to do is it's actually best just to take this test. Let's insert a new table. This will be our blank test. And we can put that in there. This must be a report. Okay, this is a little bit complicated. Um, Sorry about that. I think this should work, but it's just unfortunate that I couldn't fully explain what was going on. So this should all now be fine. Now it should be fine. Okay, is that needed? No. Okay, so now let's run our tests. Okay, so it's a success. Um, cool. So let's that's a test. Don't know what that is. Don't know what that is. Sometimes these .idea things come up. You can just commit them. It doesn't matter. So what we're really committing here is this test. So let's just go test one or test for screen one. And then we can check this and say test for screen two, but this is just the default. So we can say default, or actually not, we leave it up. But this is just for the default. Okay, then we want to get our actual test for test two, which is here. Control A, Control C, Control A, Control V. Okay, so this is interesting. We don't have, we're not using these two now. Let's make a note of that. Second test doesn't use setup function or activity scenario. Not sure why that is. But anyway, then we're going to have our test inside there. We can also call it test one. And what this test does is it launches that screen, passing it the intent information. And then it's asserting that it contains total 700. And the reason it wants 700 is because it's putting 100 for each day, which should total to 700. Okay, let's run that. Okay, there's a problem. Wonder what the problem is for. Okay, let me pause and find out. I'll get back to you. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit what I've done, and then I'm going to attempt to fix things. Okay, so screen to test. Commit that. And then I'm going to make changes. I'll come back to you with my changes. Yeah, I made change here. It was this said version 1 and this said version 1. So I just changed those now. So now it looks like it's success, so that's good. Okay, cool. Then last, let's look at GitHub Actions. You can also find it in Arc at Learning Unit 2, Theme 5 under Lecture Resources called GitHub Actions. So we're going to make a file with this name. So you can just go to Project View, right click on the main folder, new, just file. You can paste that whole thing in. It's going to create a folder, a subfolder, and a file in that. Just say add, so it's in here. Then we're going to copy this, paste it in. This doesn't really do much, but it's just an example to show that you're using GitHub Actions. So let's first of all commit our test, screen test to fix. and then we can commit our action, GitHub actions. Let's commit those and push. Now, lastly, with GitHub actions, let's go to GitHub to our thing, refresh the page if needed. Now we can see all our files there, and we can now go to actions. We can see our actions is now loading here. So it's in progress. So we can wait for that to get done. Should be fairly quick, but we can also time it if we want. Anyway, I'm going to pause and let you know how that goes. Okay, it took about 3 minutes. Yeah, so it's passed. It was just a build. And what is this? Anyway, whatever. Okay, so that's where you see GitHub Actions. Okay, so that's basically everything. Um, so yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Sorry about the issues with the writing tests. Yeah, that's a little bit confusing. Um, but yeah, what can we do about it? All right, bye.